Chapter 7 Oracle. "It is beautiful," said Carmenta, her voice echoing from speakers high on the roof of the Titan Child's bridge. Astrios turned to look at the tangled lump of cables hanging above the command dais. He could see the tech witch's hand, limp and unmoving amongst the oiled metal coils. He wondered if she had meant to speak out loud. Sometimes he wondered whether she was entirely aware of what she did. He frowned. The bundle of cables twitched as he looked at it, as if she had sensed his gaze and flinched away. He turned and looked back at the bank of picked screens that formed a pillar which rose to the arched roof high above. Images of space flowed across the screens, showing them all what Ahriman had led them to. Astrios saw a sun, bright blue. It burned at the system's heart with a cold radiance. Curtains of pale glass filled the void. They folded and shifted as the Titan Child cut through them. Occasionally, Astrios thought he saw the outline of a watching face or figure. Then the angle or flow of light would change, and it would vanish. Static bloomed in the image from his augmentic eye. His skin was prickling. Tinnitus rang in his ears, rising and fading. They were deeper inside the eye of terror than he had ever been before. He felt as if something were crawling under his skin, seeping into his blood and thoughts. Had it always been like this, even on the eye's edge? Had he become dead to the warp's touch? He realized that someone had spoken and turned sharply. Ahriman stood behind him, gazing at the screens, a frown making ridges on his smooth forehead. "What?" he said. The ringing in his ears rose in pitch. Ahriman looked at him. "Look," Ahriman's thoughts spoke inside Astrios' skull. He flinched at the telepathic intrusion, and then followed Ahriman's gaze as he turned to look at one of the largest screens. A planet loomed out of the spills of gas. Astrios did not know how he had not seen it before. It was massive, its surface flowing with spirals of ochre yellow and dark red. He could see other planets looming close beyond it, bloated spears in the mist. They were far too close together for them to be in stable orbits. The planet was getting larger and larger, and, for a second, he was not sure if it was swelling or if they were moving closer. "We should not be moving that fast." He felt Ahriman chuckle in his thoughts, and slammed his mind shut with a snarl of will. "My apologies," said Ahriman. He turned and looked to Carmenta's nest. "The moon, mistress. Bring us to a dead stop within shuttle range." Astrios saw it then, a black spear hanging above the yellow and red-swirled surface of the planet, a lone moon orbiting its parent. He saw light glint where it touched the moon's surface. He stared at it. He would go to it. He must go to it. He knew he must, as if the ringing within his ears were suddenly a voice, just on the edge of hearing, calling for him to come and see. Ahriman turned to leave the bridge, and Astrios moved to follow. Ahriman stopped and looked at the librarian. "I need no bodyguard for this, Astrios. I will go alone. No harm will come to me." Astrios glanced at the crowded planets and the billows of gas. For a second he saw an eye, larger than a gas giant, the black moon forming its pupil. Then he shuddered, and it was gone. "How can you be sure?" he asked, but Ahriman gave no answer. The shuttle settled onto the cavern floor in a whirl of venting gas. It was a small, blunt-winged and box-sided vehicle, its gray fuselage chipped and streaked with rust. In the meager crew compartment, Ahriman heard the servitor pilot blurt a string of code, and felt the vehicle's frame shake as the seals unlocked and the rear hatch descended to reveal the gas-fogged world beyond. He stepped out. A dim blue light shone from within the fog. Atmosphere safety runes pulsed green for a second, blinked out, and then returned in unresolved amber. The cavern floor was black and as smooth as polished glass. He could see reflections slide across it as he moved forwards. The whole moon was a black crystal orb hanging in space, its surface smooth and unbroken except for a kilometer-wide circular opening. The shuttle had descended into that opening, and it kept descending for over an hour. At least it had seemed an hour to Ahriman. He was not naive enough to believe that such things as time were absolute here. He began to walk, his footsteps clicking on the black crystal. After a few moments, the fog swallowed the shuttle behind him. Other shapes appeared in the thin light. He saw walls of the same black glass as the surface he walked on. White stone statues appeared from the fog. Some had their arms raised as if in greeting. Others looked terrified. One appeared to be weeping. Carved images of eyes looked back at him, and he thought their stare followed him. The flow of the warp was so strong that he was not sure what he was seeing with his eyes, and what with his mind. I am a pilgrim, he realized. As the ancients ascended the steps of Parnassus, so I come here hoping for a revelation. History is the turning of a circle, Magnus the Red had once said. Nothing dies, not truly. The symbols of old change and are reborn, and the new paths turn out to be already worn for a time. After a while, Ahriman realized that he must have passed into a tunnel. When he glimpsed walls, they seemed closer and curved up to some point lost in the fog. He was also not alone. He saw the first of them as he looked up into a break in the fog. A figure was walking on the ceiling. It was spindle-limbed, its legs back-jointed like those of a bird. Half-formed quills covered the skin visible between the plates of its sapphire armor. It carried a halberd, the blade polished to a silver edge. Ahriman felt his hand go to the hilt of his sword without thinking. The creature stopped and bent its head back to look at him. Clusters of blue and yellow eyes glittered across its face. It did not move, and, after a second, he took his hand from his sword and walked on. He saw others, tall creatures with helms like long-beaked birds, hunched figures swathed in yellow robes, squat things in silver scale armor with many arms. Some followed him, trailing him through the mist, walking on the walls or floor or ceiling as they pleased. None approached him, nor spoke a word. He walked on for what felt like days, never knowing if he was closer to his goal. All the while, the winds of the warp blew over him, carrying a taste of dry sand and lightning. At last, when he had wondered if he was walking in an eternal circle, he took a step and the fog vanished. He blinked. He stood at the base of a spherical chamber that could have swallowed a battle titan. The light was stark and bright, but had no source and seemed to come from every angle. The black walls were featureless and mirror smooth, but reflected nothing. He could see no doors, and when he turned, there was no sign of how he had entered. The warp was utterly calm. That, more than anything, sent his hand back to his sword. There was no need for that, the voice filled Ahriman's mind. He could feel the soothing notes in the sending, the surety and amusement. Ahriman kept his hand on his sword. I come for answers. A wall of sound hit him, shaking his flesh inside his armor. He heard his own voice repeating his words in fading snatches. Answers to questions, questions. Of course, said the voice in his head. There was something behind him, not a presence, but an absence in his mind, like a shadow cast by something he could not see. He turned, his sword in his hand. Fire flaring from the sigils worked into its blade. The light of it shone out, reflecting off the black mirror walls. The sword burned in his grip, pain spiraling from his hand into his mind. He screamed and dropped the hilt. I said there was no need for that, said the oracle. I don't like the look of that, said Thidius. Astrios followed his brother's gaze to the images of the pict screen. Both Thidius and Caden had joined him on the bridge while they waited for Ahriman's return from the Black Moon. No, agreed Caden. That looks less than positive. Astrios frowned at the screens. The clouds of gas that filled the void had thickened and darkened, their color shifting from pale blue to a cloudy green. He looked away. His head had been aching since they had arrived at whatever this place was. Looking at the screen just made the pain behind his eyes worse. Are you well, brother? Asked Thidius. Astrios nodded, but risked another look at the screens. The gas clouds were now so thick that he could not see planets or stars. Something felt fundamentally wrong. Mistress, he called, and heard the dryness in his own voice. Mistress Carmenta. Static filled a long pause, and then Carmenta's voice crackled across the bridge. Yes, Astrios? Do you see the change in the void? I do, but my sensors are... Her voice trailed off. Are functioning less than satisfactorily. I'm going to bring us closer to the moon. Astrios nodded. His head was swimming and he felt as if he was going to vomit. A vibrating note ran through the ship, and the image on the screens began to shift slowly as the Titan child closed on the moon. Look, said Caden. Astrios looked and felt the pain in his head spread down his neck. The clouds were billowing across the void, fattening in sickly green folds. Impossible green lightning lit them from within and flashed across their surface. Astrios felt as if someone were trying to force a fist through the back of his skull. The pain in his head had become a keening cry. He saw shapes move beneath the clouds' skin. They grew larger and then faded, like fish swimming closer to the surface, only to dive into the depths again. Astrios felt his knees buckle and hit the deck. He could not hear. Lights danced in front of his eye. The cry rose higher and louder in his head. He tried to shut it out, but it grew stronger. He felt someone pulling him to his feet. "I can hear them," he heard himself say. "They are calling. They have come for us." The oracle hung in the air in front of Ahriman, its arms held at its sides, its palms open. It wore armor that might once have been made for a space marine, but it had long since become something else. Its surface flowed like quicksilver. Ahriman could see reflections of things that were not there in the rippling surface. Hooded figures, dying suns, reaching hands. Robes fluttered around the oracle in streams of fabric that changed color as they moved. A blank bronze helm without holes for eyes, mouth, or nose hid its face. Small white and blue orbs revolved around the oracle like planets around a sun. Ahriman looked at one of the spheres and saw the blue iris and black pupil of an eye staring back at him. "Did you find it? Did you understand it?" asked the oracle. The thought voice was measured and uncolored by emotion. It was almost musical. Ahriman shook his head, not understanding the questions, wondering whether he should. "Is it you, Menkara?" said Ahriman, his eyes moving across the oracle's silvered form. He could feel the oracle's psychic senses playing over his own thoughts. It would have been easier to talk in thought, but something made him shrink back from such contact with the being in front of him. The oracle nodded its head once. "It has been a long time," said Ahriman. "Since we saw each other? Since the banishment?" Ahriman saw in his mind a sharp-faced young warrior in the robe of a Corvidae novitiate, then the thousand suns epistolary in a serpent helm, then the hunched figure reading tomes by the light of the planet of the sorceress's 9 suns. For a second, he saw the face of his memories reflected in the silver surface of Menkara's armor. "Do I look so different to your eyes?" said the oracle. "You have changed. A matter of perspective. I have questions. Who does not?" The oracle turned as if looking away with its blind face, its orbiting eyes swiveling to keep their gaze on Ahriman. "There will be a cost, of course, a tribute." Ahriman was silent. Menkara, the oracle of many eyes. He had heard the name several times during his exile, caught from the lips of sorcerers and muled by the demon touched. He had always wondered and feared if the Menkara the tale spoke of was his one-time brother. Now he knew, but the creature in front of him was no longer his kin. Not in any true sense. It was something beyond mortal, something to be feared before it was trusted. "I could have taken this path," he thought. "I could have extended my mind across time, stretching to see everything, even things that may not yet been. I could have traded myself for such knowledge." He shivered, and felt the reassuring taste of air fill his lungs. "Once I have answered you, I will ask you one question of my own. You will answer with the truth. That is the price." Ahriman nodded once. "I will pay that tribute." The oracle turned back to him and floated to the ground. Its feet touched the smooth curve of the floor. It took 2 paces and stopped an arm's reach away from Ahriman. The dropped sword lay on the floor between them. "Ask, and I will answer." Ahriman's mouth opened, but the question that came out was not the one he had intended. "What happened to you?" The oracle's laugh crinkled across Ahriman's thoughts. He felt the weight of years that had passed as millennia, the millennia that had been lived as eons. "Time, my brother. Choices. Time and choices change all things, as you well know." Ahriman thought of the 9th sun rolling into the sky of the planet of the sorcerers, of the rest of the legion surrounding him and his cabal in the dawn light. He had last seen Menkara then, standing amongst those he had not trusted to be a part of his conspiracy. "I am sorry for what I did to you, for what I did to all of you." The oracle tilted its featureless head. "Are you sorry, or are you sorry that you failed?" The oracle shook its head. "What I am is not your doing, Ahriman. Your sin is that you cannot see the limits of your power. Even in despair, you gather all woes and faults to you, and claim more than is your due. I destroyed the Legion. Did you? Was that your choice? It was no other's." Again Ahriman felt the oracle's chuckle shiver across his mind. "Fate is a web that catches all, Ahriman. Each choice spawns thousands of possibilities. Those possibilities birth more, until what began and what ends cannot be told so easily. Ahriman felt patterns form in his mind's eye as he absorbed the message. He saw golden strands, thousands, tens of thousands, millions of strands burrowing through black time, overlapping and branching even as he watched. He felt his mind reel, then kindle with awe. It was magnificent. He was seeing the consequences of actions small and great, all connected, all tumbling like cards falling through air. It felt terrifying and beautiful. It felt like returning home. He plunged into the image, following strands of consequence, hungry to see ever finer connections. But even as he reached, the connections changed, broke, and multiplied. He spun on, unheeding of anything else. He must see. He must understand. As he spiraled through the golden web, he felt the brush of feathers and heard the laughter of ravens. "No!" he shouted. The image dimmed until it was nothing but a lingering memory of a glowing web. The oracle nodded slowly. "My fate could have been yours, my knowledge your curse. Perhaps if you had not enacted the rubric, you would be as I am. Perhaps others would stand before you and ask what you see. You have fallen far. We all fell, brother. I would not have made the same choices as you." The oracle shrugged, the gesture fluid and inhuman. "But you did not come here to elaborate such matters. What will happen to our legion?" "Another question you did not come here to ask." Ahriman did not move, but held his gaze steady. After a second the oracle turned its head and looked up. The gesture was exactly as it would have been if it was looking into space while considering how to answer, and the movement of the featureless face made Ahriman's skin crawl. "The legion will die. It will become less than the dust. Those that remain will be as I am, creatures rather than the warriors we once were. Over time, no one will remember us. We will become a memory covered over by time. That is what you see? Isn't it what you see?" The oracle's thought voice paused. "You were our seer, Ahriman. You are master of the Corvidae. You taught us all. What can I tell you that you could not grasp for yourself if you wished? Why did you not read the tides of the future yourself? Do you mistrust yourself so much that you dare not?" The eyes had stopped orbiting the oracle. Each one hung in the air, stationary, looking at Ahriman. "Or have you looked and feared to see more? Answer me." "It is as I said, or it might be. The future is a diamond, each possibility a facet to be perceived by a different eye. The legion may end as I have said, or in countless other ways. It may survive. It may rise. You know this. You have seen some of it for yourself." Ahriman remembered the vision, the whispers of the crow. "Time is not fixed, nor is flesh, nor is fate," it had said. "An uncertain prophecy is worthless. That is their nature, my teacher. You asked only because you wished me to deny the truth you already knew." "No part of my teachings remains in you," said Ahriman, his voice flat and cold. "No? But you are here nonetheless. Ask yourself what you truly wish to know, the truth, or the lie that forgives you your choices. A question is no answer. You know that is a lie." The oracle fell quiet, and the two stared at each other as the moment extended in buzzing silence. "Come, ask the real question you came to ask." "Firing!" called Carmenta, and the Titan child shook. The screens flashed white and dissolved into pixelated snow in front of Astrios' eyes. The view an instant before had been the curdling clouds rushing out to envelop them. The white and yellow vapor had brushed against the hull of the Titan child, as if caressing it. Carmenta had started to fire a second later, even though there was no target. "Show us what is happening," shouted Caden. The bridge shook again. No reply came from Carmenta. Howling voices tore through Astrios' mind, opening flares of multicolored pain behind his eyes. He felt as if he was going to fall again. The cries in his head broke into discordant shrieking. He had tried to close them out, but his will was sand trying to hold the tide. The tide. He remembered Ahriman's cool gaze in the days of training. He remembered the feeling of calm, of rising through deeper and deeper stillness, his mind floating above the flood. He was still standing. The deck was vibrating now with a steady drumbeat as the Titan child fired its weapons again and again. The pit screens had come back into focus, and Caden and Vidius were staring at them. The flare of the Titan child's weapons lit the darkness, rolling in discordance with the lightning that crawled through the vapor. There were shapes visible amongst the clouds, like patches of moving shadow cast by creatures with wings and bodies made of knives. One stood close to the picked eyes, and Astrios heard the shriek rise in his mind. "Why are they not attacking?" said Thaddeus. "What?" growled Astrios, glancing at his brother. His head was clearer than it, but it was taking all his effort to keep his mind shielded from the shrieks. Thaddeus did not look away from the screen. Beside him, Caden nodded. "Whatever they are not friendly, but they are just watching us," muttered Caden. Astrios glanced back to the screen. "What are they doing?" asked Thaddeus. The Titan child gave a great shudder, and the pit screen flashed as a broadside turned the clouds into neon orange sheets. A shriek tore through Astrios' head, and he growled in pain. This time it felt like a tortured laugh. It sounded like contempt. He felt cold. The shrieks in his head felt suddenly familiar. He knew what they were. He had heard men give such cries, and listened as predators howled them into the night as they stalked through the trees. "They are waiting," he said quietly. His mouth felt very dry. "They are waiting for their prey." "I am hunted," said Ahriman softly. "A truth both deep and shallow. Tolbek came seeking me, to kill me or drag me to another's knees." Ahriman paused, but the oracle did not move or speak. "Who did he serve? Who is hunting me?" "Many hunt you, Ahriman," said the oracle, shaking its head. "I turn over a rock on any world, and I find another who would hound you to your death. Who did Tolbek serve? You know. You have known since before they came. You knew at the moment they came for you. You knew when you were banished who would come after you." "No," said Ahriman, but he could hear the tremor in the word. In his mind a face appeared, grave, serious, lined by doubt and worry, the face of a friend he had persuaded to follow him into ruin. Tolbek served Amon. Amon. The word clung to his tongue as it slid into his mind, and he could not be sure if he had spoken at first. The oracle nodded slowly. "Who else? The hardest to persuade, the most doubting, the one most loyal to the Primarch besides yourself. He followed you, believed you, allowed himself to dream as you did. That trust bought him the destruction of everything he held dearest. He burned his hopes because he trusted you." Ahriman found that he was looking at the sword that lay on the black floor. His eyes moved across the flame-winged bird forming the crossguard, the red stone set in its pommel. It had been Tolbek's sword, a brother's sword wielded against him. "Vengeance," he said quietly. "I cannot see his mind or predict his goals, but he dreams still. You gave him that ability, the arrogance to set knowledge against the decrees of fate. He has drawn knowledge and power to himself. He will storm the planet of the sorcerers if he has to, and challenge the court of change." "Why?" said Ahriman. "What does he intend? Why does he need me, if not for simple vengeance? You will have to find that answer for yourself." "Do you not know the answer?" asked Ahriman, but the oracle continued as if it had not heard. "There is a choice. The future is fractured. I see lines of choice vanish into darkness, and I cannot see their ends. The final death of the Legion may come to pass. I can see the paths that lead to that outcome with greater clarity than any others. But there are other ends, and other paths." Ahriman looked up. At his back he heard a crow's chuckling call echo in memory. "You know this? You have seen it? It has been told to me. By whom? I cannot say. Cannot or will not. Both." There was a finality to the thought, and the oracle began to rise into the air. "Wait," said Ahriman. "I have more questions." "No, not yet. But there is another way, a way of saving the Legion? Perhaps." In his mind Ahriman saw an image of Tenkara as a young novitiate looking up at him from the teaching circle, his handsome face split by a crooked smile. All prophecy is the interaction of the probable and the paradoxical. All is uncertain, even when it appears to have been fated. Ahriman smiled in spite of himself. My own words. In his mind the memory image of Menkara smiled more widely. "Thank you for the reminder." Ahriman nodded and picked up the sword from the floor. He sheathed it, his mind turning with thoughts and possibilities. He had renounced the dreams that he had used to destroy the 1,000 suns. He could not go back, not now, no matter the cost. But, came a voice out of the jostle of thought and emotion, but it was you that set this in motion. It did not end with the rubric. Your curse lives on, and yet you dare not face it. You run and let your legion die because you were wrong once. The mist was rising about him, hiding the spherical chamber. He began to walk into it, allowing it to fold over him. My tribute, Ahriman. The oracle's voice was clear in his head, but distant, as if being carried from far away. I will have my tribute. Ahriman turned and looked up to the ascending figure that had once been his brother and his pupil. Ask your question, said Ahriman. The oracle continued to rise, its form seeming to dissolve in the thickening mist. Why did you not allow yourself to die after your banishment? Ahriman's skin prickled. He thought of the lifetimes he had spent on the edge of the Eye of Terror, never allowing himself to be as he was, always waiting for death that never came, but never running to meet it. He thought of what he had to do now. Fate is made of paths not taken, he thought to himself. Because I still dream of hope, old friend, he called into the mist as it took the last sight of the oracle. Then he turned and strode away. The shuttle, called Carmenta. It's returning. The bridge was silent. Caden glanced at Astrios. Thedia stood watching the screens that now showed just the roiling mass of sickly cloud outside the hull. The shrieks had vanished from Astrios' mind a second before Carmenta spoke. Where is it? He asked. It's just broken the surface of the moon. Astrios was already moving. Caden and Thidius followed a second later. The warp rose up to meet Ahriman. 1 second his mind was still and floating amidst the glassy calm of the oracle's moon, and the next he was reeling as waves of energy broke over him. The walls of the shuttle compartment shimmered and became translucent. Pale clouds boiled around him like milk curdling as it poured into bile. High shrieks filled his ears and stabbed into his thoughts. The image of the shuttle he sat in started between solidity and transparency. He saw something amongst the clouds, something that was gliding on the storm winds. Dark silhouettes appeared in the churning fog. The shrieking was all around him now, filling his mind and ears. He released his harness and unfolded to his feet. The floor of the compartment felt solid beneath him, but he could see through the metal as if it were glass. One of the shadow shapes swooped close. It reached towards him. He could see the shadow of its claws the instant before they punched through the skin of reality. Red and green light wet from the wound as the claws slashed it wide. Ahriman could see light and color swirling in the space beyond the hole which hung in the rushing clouds. The shrieking was a single high, discordant note. Ahriman felt the hairs on his skin rise as if pulled by static. Slowly, almost delicately, a creature pulled itself from beyond. It paused, crouching on the lip of reality, its head swaying from side to side. Armor plates shimmered with an oily rainbow of colors as it moved. Bulbous organic growths had sprouted across its body, like rust blooming on iron left in lightless water. Pale spines ran down the jump pack that hung from its shoulders. Ahriman had heard of such creatures. Space Marines lost to the warp in the sharpness of their blades. If they had a name for themselves, none knew it, but to those who knew how to call them, they were named warp talons. It flexed its knife-blade claws. Pale green fire ignited in the jets on its back. It looked at Ahriman with red eyes and leapt, dragging a call of the storm vapor in its wake. Behind it, 4 more wounds began to rip wide. A cliff of pitted iron appeared out of the fog. The lips of blast doors opened wide to greet them. The shuttle's engines roared, and its hull snapped back into solidity, closing off the vision of the storm beyond. And then the shuttle rang like a gong and spun. Ahriman tumbled from his feet as the world turned over. Sparks showered around him as a flake of the hull peeled back. The creature looked down at Ahriman for a second, and then pounced. The claws met Ahriman's kind shield with a burst of light, and a sound like a lightning strike. The creature sprang back, hooking its hands and feet to the opposite wall. It hissed. Ahriman felt the shuttle tumbling around him. He could hear the noise of more claws, raking the outside of the hull. The creature leapt at him. Ahriman's mind burned. A white-hot beam flashed from his eyes to meet its assault. It shrieked, and Ahriman felt the warp twist out of his grasp. Surprise was still forming in his mind when the claws met his stomach. They punched through his armor and into the soft flesh beneath. He had long enough to think that it felt cold, like swallowing ice. Then the bulk of the creature rammed into him and slammed him to the deck. The shuttle spun, and he felt his skin press against the inside of his armor as G-force tried to pull him away from the floor. The creature punched its free claw and hooked feet into the deck, pinning him in place. He looked up at it. The creature's red eyepieces were looking back at him. It was so close he could see the fumes venting from slits in the snout of its helm. "I will not die here," he thought. He sank his mind into his body, forcing calm through his nerves and muscle. It felt like plunging into water. He could feel the claws in his guts. He saw the arrangement of molecules, bone and muscle fiber, spin symbolically before his mind's eye, and change what he saw with a thought. His skin tingled and went numb. In his guts, the blood stopped flowing. Organs began to harden. Bone became like metal. He felt his heart stop. Above him, the creature's face split, a wide, wet crack running across its faceplate. Ahriman could see sharp teeth and the red ruin of a mouth. "Alive," the creature hissed. "Alive, yes." It licked its teeth with a black tongue. "Not whole, no." It pulled back and tried to pull its claws from Ahriman's guts. He did not even feel it. There was just the icy rush as the warp spun through his blood and bone. The creature howled and tried to rip its claws free. They held firm, as if they were locked inside stone. Behind the faceplate of his helm, Ahriman smiled. He did not have long. He could not maintain the alteration to the substance of his body indefinitely. The creature opened its mouth to roar again. Ahriman struck upwards. His fingers splayed as they punched into the open maw. The creature reeled. Ahriman closed his hand, his armored grip digging into the soft meat of the creature's throat. He split his mind into two streams of thought. One half continued to breathe stone and steel into his flesh, while the second began to burn. The creature thrashed, glowing cracks running across its armor from its mouth. Ahriman felt his mind brush against what remained of the creature's soul. It felt withered and rotten, like blood turned to black jelly in a dead heart. Out of the corner of his eye, Ahriman saw the toothed blast door loom into view. He did not have time to move before the impact. Astrios was 10 paces into the hangar bay when the shuttle clipped the blast doors. He saw the scene unfold in delicate slowness as he and his brothers ran forwards. The shuttle flipped over, its stabilizer fins shearing off. Shreds of armor plating spun in all directions. Fuel sprayed in its wake, burning for an instant in the cloud of air from the ruptured cabin. Astrios saw shapes fling themselves from the shuttle just before the impact. They had been space marines once. Lines of power armor could be seen under layers of growth, like polluted coral. Green jets of flame pushed them up into the darkness above. A third fell away with the rest of the wreckage, its body scattering in globules of black fluid as it fell to the deck. Another jumped too late. A chunk of the shuttle's wings spun towards it faster than it could move, and mashed it into 2 ragged portions. He is dead. The thought slipped into his mind with a cold certainty. The largest piece of debris was skidding across the deck in a slew of sparks. Part of his mind identified it as a section of the passenger compartment. It looked as if a titan had stamped on it. Nothing could be alive inside that. Above them, the 2 surviving creatures turned and dived. Caden and Thidius knelt, raised their bolters as one, and fired. Explosions burst in the air, trailing the foremost creature as it spun and jinked downwards. It shrieked as it dived, its true voice mingled with the scream of its hungering soul. A stride ahead of his brothers, Astrios drew his sword and ran towards the wreckage. The second creature crashed into the twisted fuselage and began to tear through the metal plating, as if trying to dig down to something buried within. Astrios heard a cry from behind him and glanced over his shoulder. The first creature was climbing back into the air on a column of white-green fire. Caden thrashed in its claws. Thidius was on the ground, the muzzle of his bolter twitching as he searched for a clear shot. Astrios' stride faltered. The creature holding Caden flew higher, dark liquid drizzling in their wake. He could see Caden's bolters still gripped in his flailing hands. The creature shrieked, and Astrios could taste the hunter's joy in the sound. As he watched, Caden twisted and rammed the muzzle of his bolter between his body and the creature. The bolter roared. Shell casings showered down to the deck. Then a juddering line of explosions broke from the creature's back. It dropped Kate in an instant before the green fire at its back became a rolling sphere of heat. He did not see Caden hit the floor. In front of Astrios, the surviving creature gave a howl of triumph. He snapped his eyes back to it as the distance closed. It had shredded the remains of the shuttle and was crouching amongst the wreckage. In the wash of gunfire, its black armor glistened with spatters of machine oil and blood. Something was moving at its feet. He saw a hand reaching up as if trying to ward the creature off. The creature unfolded to its full height and splayed its arms wide. The claws of its fingers were the white of bone. Its angular head tilted back, and Astrios heard the silent howl of triumph in his mind. The creature noticed him an instant before the tip of Astrios' blade pierced through its left eye and punched from the back of its head. Astrios felt the impact jerk up his arm and snapped his mind into the blade's core. The creature's head and upper torso exploded in a web of crawling lightning. The remains slumped onto the wreckage and twitched until the last electrical arcs vanished. Astrios unfastened his helmet. The outer doors were sealed, but the atmosphere was still thin. He curled his lip. The corpse at his feet was fuming a scent of charred meat and spoiled fruit. He turned his head to where Ahriman struggled amidst the twisted wreckage, impossibly alive. His armor was torn, but there were no signs of blood or wounds. Astrios bent down to pull the twisted spars of metal aside and then paused. "When you are out of this, I think it is the time for some answers."